What's up, y'all? It's your boy, Seth Grimes, back here with another piece of bonus content. This time, we're taking a look at the brand new book by Brian Gewirtz titled There's Just One Problem. True Tales from the former one-time seventh most powerful person in WWE. For those that don't know, Brian Gewirtz is the former head writer of the WWE. He came on board right about the same time that Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara left WWE to go over to kill WCW, and they had to fill that void, and Brian Gewirtz filled that void indeed. And this is just one of those really fun wrestling books that tells the story. For me, pro wrestling it's more the outside of the ring stuff is far more fascinating than the inside the ring stuff. You know, I love the pro wrestling business for everything that goes on in and around and behind the scenes in pro wrestling. It's just great shit. And this book goes into such good detail, intimate stories about people like Vince McMahon, Stephanie, Shane, Triple H, The Rock, Stone Cold. There's just Roddy Piper. There's so much fun stuff here to sink your teeth into. The book opens, and I won't spoil the whole thing. This won't be spoiler heavy or anything. I might go into a couple details here, just some more of the high spots of the book, but I'll go over a few things here with you. The book kind of opens up with him in wrestler's court. I believe he talked about this on some of the podcast interviews that he's done, Brian Gewirtz, where he gets called to wrestler's court over supposedly bribing Edge and Christian. Those are the charges for TV time, or taking payola for TV time. Bob Holly caught Edge giving Brian Gewirtz a Flash action figure, and Brian Gewirtz accepting an action figure from Edge is proof that he is on the take, and that Edge and Christian are buying their TV time. So, of course, Holly goes and narcs to the locker room, and this turns into a big wrestler's court schmaz where they're on trial, and he kind of takes you inside the infamous wrestler's court with The Undertaker as the judge. And this is a fun story in general, because I don't think anybody else has ever really taken us inside of wrestler's court quite like that. This has always kind of been something that we've heard about, this mythological court that wrestlers get called to, that The Undertaker presides over. He said that Bradshaw was the prosecuting attorney, which was never good. You get JBL. JBL's the one that's trying to get you got. That's never good. You never want JBL on your bad side anyway. He's probably wrestling's most infamous bully. And there's a little bit about that in here as well. So that's kind of where the whole thing opens up. It kind of hits you with the high spot match, right? You know, to kind of get you into it. And then he kind of goes into his writing career and, you know, coming out of college. He grew up a wrestling fan and then kind of grew out of it for a little while. And then got into writing, tried to get a gig in Hollywood, got a small writing job in Hollywood, and then circumstances somehow brought him to an opening for WWE. Apparently, he said at the time he was hired on to work for them after he did his interviews and everything, which he said was a lengthy interview process. Even back then, he had to interview with, I think he had to interview with the writing team, which at the time was Russo and Ferrara. He had to interview with Vince himself. He had to interview with HR. I think he said there was like 4 or 5 interviews total. He had to interview with Vince and Linda together. That would have been, wow. Can you imagine? Oof. The nerves just having to go interview with Vince. God damn. But they offered him a job to be a writer for WWE.com, which he turned down because he wasn't going to move across. He was in Hollywood. He wasn't going to move to Stanford to write for a website. You know, he was an aspiring TV writer. So that was where his goals and aspirations were. But then once Russo and Ferrara quit, which was shortly after that, they called him back up and said, you know what? How about we give you this job instead? So they brought him in. He talks about his first day on the job and feeling awkward, and they didn't even let him in the building at first. He had to pull up like a printed out proof of his email job offer or whatever. He said Stephanie was the one that really kind of took him under the wing, showed him around the building, introduced him to everybody, and that he paints Stephanie just throughout this whole thing as just the best of the McMahons here. Very kind, very caring, very like looking out for his best interest. And she was the one that gave him the heads up about the wrestler's court. Like, hey, you're being called to wrestler's court. You should probably, bring some beer and some pizza, and you can't not go to this. You have to. And she was there the whole way through for him in lots of different situations. There was and I'm going to be a little all over the place. He talks about getting into a physical altercation with Paul Heyman. He said him and Paul Heyman were like arch enemies, and they would fight and argue over everything, basically, especially when Heyman was the lead writer of SmackDown. During the brand split, they split him off, and Gewirtz was the head writer of Raw. And he said that they would just get into it in meetings to the point where it turned physical, and Stephanie had to be the one to suspend them both. And it was just, he continues to paint Stephanie in this light of being the one who has empathy for him, the one who cares, the one who's there to kind of help him navigate this treacherous waters of WWE. He talks about Shane McMahon, and he's kind of like a chaos factor in a lot of ways, that he's described. Like he talks about a time where him and the writers are just sitting in the writers' room, and Shane bursts in, and he's just like, this is at the corporate fucking headquarters. He's just like, come on, you guys are going to come take some bumps. Just randomly like pulls them out. And Gewirtz is wondering about how this is even like, what if somebody gets injured, hurt on the job kind of thing. Like there's zero fucks given by Shane. Just come on, we're going to go do this right now. In an attempt to kind of teach the writers a little respect for it. He talks about some of the other bumps. So this led into the locker room hearing that he took a couple bumps. And then, Bully Ray was like, okay, well, if you're taking bumps now, why don't we take a power bomb? Gewirtz couldn't say no, because you can't get the whole locker room there now circling you and looking at you, and they hear that you took a bump. Well, we're gonna take a real bump now, and they fucking so they give Bully gives Gewirtz the same bump that he gave Mae Young, the power bomb off the top rope. Yikes. The lots of fun stories. He talks about how Piper was his childhood hero, and how he was like his guy in wrestling growing up, and now how when Piper came back to WWE, Gewirtz was in charge of writing his stuff, and that just working with him, that WrestleMania 21 promo where it was Piper's Pit with Stone Cold Steve Austin and that whole thing. And he talks about how they were trying to be PG at that point, and there was a lot of like important people at that show, and Vince's very specific instructions were to Gewirtz, don't let Roddy swear. Whatever he does, don't let him say a swear or anything. And then he gets out there and he asks the crowd, who's the biggest rebel in WWF history? And they say Stone Cold, and he says bullshit. And apparently Vince had a fucking aneurysm backstage. And there's a lot of great stories about Vince. Vince literally slammed his headphones down. He's like, God damn it. You tell him, yelling at Gewirtz about that. You tell him that I told you not to do that. Holds Gewirtz responsible for it. He talks about getting into it with Steve Austin. He said that Steve doesn't really like him all that much, or didn't at the time. talks about how Triple H was not that friendly towards him at all. And this kind of reminded me, because I even myself, I think we all have, but I think specifically myself, kind of had these rose-colored glasses about Triple H as of late. And look, people change, and he's in a different role. He's not a talent anymore, so him as a talent is a much different person than him as a leadership role. But Triple H was a flat out dick, and was really out there to see Gewirtz fail. And there was just all kinds of fun stories about Vince. Lots of great insight into Vince. What it's like working closely with Vince. Towards the end, he talks about how him and Vince would just fight back and forth constantly, and how it taught him now that when he runs into people, because he's now working for $7 with The Rock, and how he runs into people in Hollywood who try to like strong arm him a little bit, or intimidate him, or bully him a little bit, or try to play the tough guy with him. He's like thinking in his head, like, dude, I worked with Vince McMahon for like 10 years. Fuck off. You know what I mean? Like, there ain't a goddamn thing you're going to say to me that's going to make me even bat an eyelash at you. Vince was intense, very intense. There were times where Vince just yelled at him, and Vince was a scary guy to work for at times, but he liked Vince overall, and he had a good relationship with Vince, and you get to see the kinder sides of Vince as well, and you just get, it's such insight into Vince McMahon in this book more than anything. It's like Gewirtz's story of being a writer there, yes, but as the head writer, you're like around the McMahons constantly. Stephanie is like the head of creative at the time, and then is like your direct boss, and then Vince, who you got to be in all these meetings with constantly, and you got to sit next to him during the matches. The writers sit with Vince and watch the matches or the promos. That way, if you go, if Piper were to say slip up and curse on air, Vince can slam the headset down and get mad at you and get in your face about it, because you're right there and you're the one who's got to answer for it. And he had to take Piper aside after too. Vince told him, he's like, I need you to go talk to Roddy about it, and just a great book, a great insight into this world of professional wrestling, this insane, crazy world of wrestling, because nothing, from getting powerbombed by Bully Ray off the top rope, there's nothing about this that's an average job, and that was kind of one of the fun things that came through too, is that WWE is a unique place to work for. Like, there's lots of instances of Michael Hayes walking around cussing at people and just saying ridiculous shit, and he talks about Bob Holly at one point. Apparently Gewirtz had made a comment about how Holly wears pink on his tights, and he said that Holly had responded by confronting him in the hall in front of everybody and basically saying, what do you think, I'm a F word? And he's like, would he make me a F word if I took you and fucked you in the ass right here in front of everybody? It's like, you can't say shit like that in a normal corporate environment, but this is working for the WWE. And Gewirtz had every reason to believe that Holly would do just that, so he had to say yes sir, no sir. And man, just what a life. Talks about he goes into detail about the guest host era, where like Bob Barker was a guest general manager or whatever, and that kind of thing. The anonymous general manager, he gets into the Cena and The Rock, that whole thing about how Cena called The Rock out for having his lines on his wrist tape. And some good insight into John Cena there too, because John Cena comes off as a bit of a psycho in some of these. Gewirtz said that Cena T-boned him in a go-kart. Apparently Cena had rented out a go-kart track for everybody, and Gewirtz stalled out, and he was like sideways on the track, and Cena just fucking just went T-boned him as hard as he could. And then he also like threw a t-shirt at him or something backstage, and like kind of just a little bit of the petty side of Cena, I guess, a little bit, and how there was real life heat between Cena and The Rock, and they had a very real rivalry during that little run that they had there. That kind of ended in them all having a lot of respect for each other and ending on friendly terms. So that was a fun story too. And it's just a great book. I mean, I could go on and on about all the little side stories that I remember and that sort of thing. But I would definitely want to leave a lot of it up for you to discover too as you read or you listen. But you're not going to be disappointed in this. There's all kinds of fun stories in this. And it's about as close to the McMahons as you can possibly get. And just great insight into all of them, and kind of backs up what we've heard about all of them for a long time, and you know what it's like being around them through all these podcasts and interviews and that sort of thing, books that have been written. This is another just great book that is as much a Vince McMahon book as it is a Brian Gewirtz book. So that's my thoughts. I'm going to go ahead. I actually did rate it 5 stars on Audible. I listened to it on Audible. I gave it a 5-star rating there. It's a 5-star book. If you're a wrestling fan, this is a 5-star book. It's an easy listen. It's not boring. He's cracking jokes and stuff the whole time. He's funny. He's charismatic. He's insightful, smart, self-aware. It's just a brilliant book. Go check it out. If you're into that shit, go check it out. I give it the highest of recommendations. That's all I got for you. Thanks for checking out the review. Peace, love, and pizza. I am your boy, Seth Grimes, and we'll catch you in the next review.